Um, so really quickly, before we get started, just to reiterate a couple logistical things. First off, tomorrow I do have office hours at 1:30. Please drop by if you have questions. Next week, the Thursday and Friday of next week are off. We have Thanksgiving and I guess Black Friday. So basically for that, I'm giving you all an extra week to basically for your deadline. If the week after Black Friday, so the following Friday, if you don't have a review scheduled, DM me. Just let me, I need to know where you're at. At that point, that's kind of our unofficial deadline, like our initial deadline, or official one. After that, once again, you will have time if you need it to complete your projects. But I would like to know what's up and what you're struggling with so that we have a game plan going forward, because after that, I'm probably not going to be super available. And I would like to make sure that things don't fall apart. And that like you're well supported and stuff like that. And if you need additional support, that I can do that for you, which I can't do as well when I'm like redeployed elsewhere. In the meantime, today we are going to do a few things. I don't really have, like, usually I've prepped a lecture, I've tested a few things, and I've done a bunch of stuff like that. Today we're going to be definitely trying to deploy to Heroku so that we can have our website on the internet. And I thought it would be fun, usually because I don't want to like come up with a separate GitHub repo and like create like 4 different Heroku websites to test, and because I find it's fun to go through the docs together rather than just like brushing through docs I've already seen. I haven't practiced this so in a while, so deploying to Heroku, we're just going to work through that all together. In the meantime, first off, I'm going to do a couple more things. I'm going to finish off our error handling segment because right now, if we mess something up, our code breaks. I'm going to bring up something that I found that was an error. I found that the way that I've showed you all how to serialize a user manually is not the preferred way and won't like do your key transforms for you. So you'll remember that over here in our users controller, we had like this user serializer.new. Apparently there's a more specific way to call it that doesn't just like instantialize that resource directly. It's really ugly, but I learned from the forum posts that it works. And then this happened when I started trying to send over my zip code. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Additionally, there might be other stuff. A couple of just basic refactors. And if we have time, I'm also going to make a little form to allow us to send over a location and then get back either the places at that location, or if they haven't sent over a location, render restaurants from that user's initial location that we have stored on their profile directly. Does that all make sense to everybody? I realize that's a lot of things that I just spat out. As I mentioned earlier, do not have a game plan for this except show you a couple things I've been meaning to show you. We all cool? Great. So first thing, let's go ahead, clear my console. Refresh the page, make sure that our console isn't. Oh, there we go. That's the first thing we should do. npm start. This looks like Rails. Your Rails. Cool. Interesting. I kind of want to read that. But we now are logged in. So what I noticed, I basically did this. I went to a Redux store, and currently we are only setting over for the username, right? I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to send back oops, sorry. Our zip code we can refresh the page. Now our serializer should work, and we do get back a zip code, but it has an underscore in it, which isn't our JavaScript way of doing things, and it's going to mess stuff up for us. This is only a problem with our zip code because our restaurants are actually like these ones are camel casing for us based on our code in serializers. We're defaulting it to key transformed camel lower, but because our users controller is calling user serializer.new directly, we are ending up we are unlike restaurants controller, which is just using like we're describing how to use the serializer rather than instantializing it directly, that we get some errors. The thing I found like 20 minutes ago was probably like 2 hours ago, but is they have this, I found this big error. It's going like, hey, yeah, if you use .new, basically it bypasses the key transform segment because we're just initializing directly. And what you end up needing to run is something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and basically like this is the kind of thing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to demonstrate the issue here, how we can fix this. I am going to copy over here what they just sent, and that looks like this. Whoops, wrong thing. Let's go ahead. New. Oh, sorry, I'm going to do this over in users, and then we can work on it. Oops. And let's go ahead. And so right now, instead of doing this like user serializer, I have to go ahead and I have to say user. And then we describe use the user serializer. This is pretty messy. I don't like it at all. A serializer and then serializer. Yes, I believe. Let's take a look. So this is pretty messy to put in right here, obviously. This is not very clean code. And of course, we have to write in 3 different places in our user serializer, in our sessions log. So in our users controller for when we create a user, in our sessions controller for when we log in, and in our auto login for when we use our token to log in. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to abstract this into a cool little method. I'm going to call render user with token user. And then in our application controller, def render user with token user, and boop. And now I can use this, I think, everywhere I want. User with token user. Token log in user. Now, ideally, if I refresh my page, so now, right now, we're getting a zip code with an underscore. If I refresh the page, we get our zip code with no underscore. Pretty gross code. If somebody finds out a neater way to write this, let me know. But I put this into a helper method, so we don't end up struggling too hard with this. And this ends up working. Oops, come on, bud. So this is just because I used that code slightly wrong before, and you might run into that error. Just a heads up. Cool. It's also helpful for what we do later. But next up, while I was doing this, right, I noticed, hey, if we try to log in and I do Nikki guest and I fail, we actually haven't error handled. And this is kind of the worst place not to error handle. We now, unfortunately, get back cannot read properties of undefined reading username, right? Because what really happened was we got back on our backend. Our backend went ahead and correctly sent us a, hey, invalid username or password. Let's go ahead and expand this. Come on, buddy. What's going on with you today? That's very rude. Whoops. Gonna try this one more time. It's gonna do the same thing. But we get like an invalid username or password. And when I refresh it too, it goes back to failing. The reason it's doing that is because local storage now has a token of undefined because I didn't tell it not to store the token if we break. Cool. So I did want to like start error handling this. And at this, we're going to get to a question Omar asked on Tuesday, which is, hey, what if we want to build a helper method in our action creators? I'm going to do both those things. Basically, right, we're actually on our backend. We are correctly sending over on a failed login invalid username and our password, get good, which is a great error message that we're just not displaying. And on our create, we are getting user.errors of full messages to sentence like, hey, you didn't send this over. Also, I just want to check really quickly. I'm going to write here, validates zip code presence true, so that we can use this later on. And I can go ahead and check Rails C, CD one backend, Rails C, user.last, user.all, user.clock, zip code. Cool, nothing in our database to break it yet. And if I did user.create, username, the big cheese, password 123, and then no zip code, we get u.errors.full messages.to sentence zip code can't be blank. Perfect. We can also honestly validate that it has 5 digits. That would work too. I'm going to be really lazy right now. But that would be a really good validation to add. But I've got other things I want to do. So first things first. In our auth, we use this submit signup or the submit login. And both of them, right? If we take a look at them, go ahead, and I'm going to close some of the splunch iron. Both of them are little fetch requests that don't have error handling. That all kind of look the same. I wonder if I can even. They look so the same that I've just selected them all together. So I'm going to start refactoring one of these, where here I go, if, let's go, whoops. If response is okay, if we get a 200 error, or if we get a 200 error code, which is, or 200 HTTP response code, then we know that we're all fine. That's just like an easy way to go ahead and be like, hey, if you didn't send back an error message, right, with a 400 or 500 code, then just go ahead and do what we normally do. Cool. Else, right, we still can parse the response as JSON, but then we should probably take the response and just alert the user that there were some errors. I'm just going to call this res2 for the sake of. And our general format is to just call this res.errors and have this be a string. I think this is good. Nope, we still need this bad boy. Bloop. And we're good to go. Cool. So this is our submit sign up. We can test that it works in submit sign up first. Let's go ahead. Let's clear our local storage so that we can get rid of some stuff and we can start logging in again. We can sign up. We'll just call this Terminator. That works. We'll do no zip code, my password of guest. And we get zip code can't be blank, which is great. We just get an alert where our error is being handled. And the reason it's doing that is because we got a 422 on the back end, which throws an error. And we don't get res.ok. We don't get our response okay. Now here's where things get interesting. At this point, this code right here is all pretty reusable. With the one weird exception that we've got a dispatch. This is happening within a function, right? I would love to be able to use this in a couple of different places. So I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to take this. Boop. And here I'm going to go ahead, make a new function that I'm going to just call handle user response. I'm actually going to take this whole bracket and replace it. So now there's a couple of things here, right? First off, we don't have response defined here. It's defined within over here. And we also don't have dispatch defined because that's also just define the scope. But that's okay because we can just go ahead and say, hey, take in res and take in dispatch, which we can just pass around because there's JavaScript and there are no rules. I'm gonna pass this to the bottom because there's JavaScript and there are no rules. And we can, if we have a function syntax, we can go ahead and even hoist this to the top so that we can keep our exports clear. And I'm just going to do handle user response res and dispatch. I can do this for the rest of them. And here we are.
So it's like the same way you can pass certain hooks. For example, you can pass use history, use navigate into Action Creator to automatically log out. He pushes you back to the home page without having to clear up your other components.
And that seems like a very good idea too. If we ever wanted to go ahead and make, yes, you can pass any function in, and that also includes right here. If we eventually wanted to, in our auth, move history.push to only happen on the conditional, we totally could. A little messy, but yeah. Yes, passing in JavaScript, everything can get passed around. There's really no rules for what you can't pass around in JavaScript. There are some rules of decency, but in this case, I don't think this breaks them. And so we can now test this out, see that this works. I'm going to get rid of this because it is a test thing. But now we can go ahead and take a look at this. So our auth is now calling the same method, right? But in our action creators, we now have this handle user response that takes in the response and the dispatch method, goes ahead, checks to see if the response is okay, turns it into JSON, and then goes ahead and sets our local storage and does a dispatch for us. And we can also do this over here. And we can now use this to make our code a little bit neater. Cool. Ooh, I just realized deployment is going to get pretty weird pretty quick. I forgot that I'm going to need to remember how to set env files in Heroku. That's going to be really fun. But we can now go ahead and test that this works. Terminator, this works. Loop, log in. Yeah, we got that back a little late, but how if I do guest again under Nikki? We're going to get submit. And this works. We do 1, 2, 3. You're back to operational. And then, oh, I changed some of the CSS so that these cards don't look weird. And I also changed the spinner. So it was in theme and centered. But we can now refresh the page and we're still logged in. Cool. Death Avenue. That's a great name for food. I'm gonna go to Death Avenue. Cool. So I think at this point we can go ahead and say push some stuff up to GitHub. Nice. And in our front end, CD. Nice. Cool. So at this point, let's go ahead and deploy this because I have no idea how long this is going to take, what we're going to do. Once again, I did not practice this in advance because I didn't feel like cloning my whole GitHub repo. So first off, we got to get the backend up. So basically, we're going to, how Heroku works, right, is it's going to go ahead and very kindly for us spin up a virtual machine that basically runs a copy of our server, but in production. And we're going to do this for our backend first, and then for our front end, where we just deploy both of them up to GitHub or to Heroku. And the way we basically do that is we just push it from our GitHub to their Heroku, and it basically works with GitHub. And I'll show you how that looks. Let's go ahead, deploying Rails to Heroku. Nice. Cool. You'll see a bunch of things like, hey, here's how you create a new Rails app. Here's how you like get Postgres installed. I would recommend using our way of doing that. But now we can go ahead. We've got this is not real. Cool. So we don't need, I think our Ruby and all of our everything based on your configuration, this should all be the same. If you're ever working on like a really old stack, right? I would recommend reading the rest of this stuff. Like, hey, make sure that you have a Heroku gem if you're on a very old version. Make sure you have a reasonable Ruby version. But if you've been following our setup pretty well, deploy your application to Heroku is pretty much where to go. Before that, I think you might need to install Heroku, which I probably have, but let's go ahead and go to the command line right here. And hitting install Heroku CLI will do this for you. If you go here, it will explain how to go about installing Heroku for your command line. What it'll allow you to do is it'll allow you to invoke Heroku wherever you want. So if I go ahead and I say Heroku right here, hopefully we can go and see. It'll be like, hey, what do you want to do? And it'll tell us a bunch of different things we can do with our Heroku. You will also probably have to create an account on Heroku, which I have unfortunately already done. But when we get over here, right, when we are finally done with this, what you really need to do to make to deploy an application to Heroku in Rails is first run Heroku create. Uh-oh. And it's being like, hey, I don't know you. Let's go ahead and fix this. Let's log into the CLI. I'm going to use my password manager. Of course, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we can go ahead. Oh no. Interesting. I don't know what this is. I told you that this was going to be freeform. Let's try this. What's a security key? No, that looks creepy. There's no way to skip this. Let's go and can I just cancel this? Let's see. Nice. Heck yeah. We don't need to enable two-factor. Cool. And then it went ahead and was like, cool, you did it. We logged in. You're logged in. This is working. And it now says creating app done. Let's go ahead and click this link just for fun. Hey, welcome to your new app. Cool. And it'll also be like, hey, this is the GitHub repo. It's on, but please don't go here directly. So now, right, you can verify that it exists by running this. Why not? Follow its instructions directly. That looks reasonable. Cool. And now all we really need to do, right, is run git push Heroku main. And this will push your main branch, the remote version, I believe. Yes. Up to Heroku to begin setting stuff up. This is going to take a while. Because what we're really doing, ooh, fun. We got a failure. And it is going ahead and telling me, hey, I'm using an old version of Ruby. Let's go ahead and take a look. Oop. Cool. It says, hey, use one of these Rubies. And then it will even go ahead and tell us how to update, specify a Ruby version. Cool. So it's saying, hey, update your gem file, change your version of Ruby. Let's go ahead and go to our gem file. 2.6.1. It wants at least 2.6.8. I'm going to go ahead and try to make that work. I'm going to delete gemfile.lock. I'm going to bundle install. Do I have RVM? That's a good question. Use 2.6.8. Ruby version manager, I believe, allows me to go ahead and specify which Ruby version. RVM install Ruby 2.6.8. I'm just going ahead and I'm installing a new version of Ruby on my machine. Hopefully this doesn't break, but this is, I feel like I've never like shown you all like just me working my way through command line issues and environment setup. So this was kind of my goal here. If this feels really freeform and boring, feel free to watch this on recording. But should have gone ahead and double check that I didn't have any of the other Ruby versions that they want. Now remember, any changes I make locally aren't going to affect me pushing up to Heroku. I'm going to have to push this to GitHub afterwards, which is why occasionally, right, you will see GitHub repos that will be like incredibly well organized commits, and then wait, crap, finally, like, I can't get this working. Trying this one thing, I still can't get this deployed. It's deployed. Wait, it wasn't deployed. As a series of commit messages. Dan Abramoff, creator of React Redux, just tweeted his a series of commit messages that look like this to remind us that nobody's above this when it comes time for deploying. Sometimes you just got to try a couple things out. Usually you will have a staging site, different places to test things. There's a lot of ways to get around the fact that sometimes things don't work quite your way in production. You don't want to push to main every single time you're trying something out. That being said, we don't have a lot of those tools when we are working as junior developers, just practicing on our own. This is taking forever. So RVM is probably the Ruby version manager that they probably had you installed. I think there's one other one that's name is I'm missing right now. If you want to post it, you can. But just be aware that I used RVM install. That might not be your case. You might have, what's the other Ruby version manager? We'll find out. Ruby version managers. RVM, RBENV, I think I've seen a bunch. I've never heard of Trumby or From, but I imagine that despite their Hobbit names, they're good too. Dana, that's first off, both of those questions very good. I don't know. I saw that.
Was it a while back or today?
It was like I saw it hit my Slack like 3 days ago.
Cool.
But that could be any number of times. I have no idea how Trumby got Truby. Okay, got you. And From. I don't know how they got named. But there's a reason why most good startups hire marketers. All right, bud. I really regret not RVM. Let's go see if there's like a. That's not good. RVM list. Let's go and see. RVM list. We have 2.6.1, 2.6.3. Wow, I've got some outdated Rubies here. You might not have to do this, which would be awesome. Do I have Airbnb? I better not. If I had both of those, I would have to figure out which one I was using. You've got this, bud. I'm just installing a new Ruby version. That isn't great. Let's go ahead and take a look at some more stuff. This is great. Cool. Man, even their docs say like, hey, we use like, here's an example using 2.5.1, which is well out of date now. I could have probably made this run different Rubies and development and production. That would have been a cool way to get new and interesting errors. But one cool thing to now talk about while we're talking about what it means to be in production. Now you're here. Well, let's try this one more time. Let's kill this. Let's bundle, install. right, RVM use 2.6.8, I believe. Yes. Bundle install. We good now? You gonna be chill? When I say development and production, right? We haven't really talked about what production means yet. There are three ways your Rails app can be run, right? The first is development, which is what we've been using this whole curriculum, where we're running this on a local machine. It's set up to work locally. And it just like makes you like you can hit things through localhost 3000. It is running the development mode of your suite. It doesn't do usually a bunch of things that production level apps will do. There is a lot that goes into taking a server that's designed to receive one request from your local machine to making it a server that's designed to receive a lot of requests on the open internet. What you'll notice though is that what this is basically, what you already can see in your gem file is a couple things like, hey, in development and test, use these gems, right? Obviously, this one isn't going to work in production because this relies on a local file that I haven't pushed up to GitHub. .env is a file that I have asked, hey, please never put this up to GitHub. Never put this anywhere except on several of the YouTube videos that I have made. But basically, this right here, please don't use this to order 1,000,000 pizzas if that's a thing you can do. Or if you do, order one pizza as a joke, and I will write you a recommendation being like, hey, I used the fact that my teacher showed their Yelp API key to order my teacher a pizza, and then I will try to my best to get you a job in some sort of field that is pretty impressive. But basically, when we're in production, we need to run a different suite of apps. The one I haven't really discussed is tests, right? And the test environment, right, is basically a test environment. Basically, when you run your tests, it needs to spin up a fake little version of Rails so that it can test out all of your things and then delete stuff, right? You would not want that running against either your development or your production servers, where it'll just be like randomly creating and deleting stuff to go ahead and see if it can create and delete stuff. So it creates a new copy. So we can try to see Rails S. Hopefully our new Ruby version didn't break everything. I could have used this time to deploy our React app, but let's go ahead and try this out. Cool. We can now test this out in our local environment. You still get, if we refresh the page, a bunch of restaurants. It goes ahead and logs in for us. You can click on this, we get a little loading spinner, and we can be like, love it. Oop. And now we get love it. Cool. So we are now able to go ahead and push up this new version with the updated rubies to GitHub, and then use that to push it to Heroku. Git status, git add dot, git commit m update Ruby version to 2.6.8. Git push. Good. Git push for Heroku main. Now main is usually where you're going to type here. If you have a very old GitHub, like a year old, you're probably going to be typing master. So just your main branch though. If you try to push it to an off branch, it'll get weird on you. There are ways to do that, but you're going to need to read some blogs. So my advice would be keep main the one you're deploying from. Now, one thing is that's a little bit different. If you use AWS Amplify, for example, which is the only other thing I've deployed, it will try its best to not make you type git push Heroku main. It will instead just watch your GitHub repository, and when you change it, it'll try its best to update it. By default, I believe. Hey, there we go. Cool. We've got something on GitHub or on Heroku. Cool. Oops. Here we go. We have floatingwave.herokuapp.com. Right, that's not going to be helpful yet because we should follow the rest of our instructions. Cool. Great. So now, Heroku Run is going to be how you basically do things in Heroku. What you're saying is open up my virtual machine and allow me to do something to it. So Heroku Run bash. We are now in an imaginary virtual machine. This is not how you should do anything, usually. Please do not use this to modify your Heroku app unless you're here to have fun. But you can go ahead and type ls, right? You can see pwd, we get /app in our virtual machine. If you have like Vim or Nano, you can even open this up and start editing some of these files. From my brief playing with it, I have not been able to use that to go ahead and edit my code directly on a server, but I bet you could. I'm going to go kill this now or exit. And we're good. But now we can go ahead and run Heroku Run break db or Rails db migrate. Let's see what this does. Cool. And it will go ahead and run this on our virtual machine. Hey. Now, at this point, unfortunately, if I do Heroku Run Rails db seed, I bet I'm going to get an error. And here we are. And the reason I'm going to get an error is it goes ahead and says undefined method map for nil class in Yelp search file 19, where we will find what I bet is our problem. If we go over here, you'll notice that 19, this is coming back nil. But the reason it's coming back nil is because I've got this little bad boy right here. If I go ahead and I run Heroku Run Rails C, we will see that if I call env the key of Yelp API key, it goes, hey, I don't know what that is, right? Because I didn't put my .env file up there. So now we can go ahead and be like, add env environmental variable Heroku. We can do CLI, or I believe you can do it just in the browser too. So here, a very classic way to do this is using this bad boy. Heroku.config set, and then whatever you want to set on Heroku. Boop. And go ahead. I'm going to take our .env file. Oh wait, whoops, we are in IRB. I'm going to exit that. Disengage from Heroku. Oops, let's just paste that again. Big set. Yelp key, this bad boy. I don't think we need the Google API key because in this case, if we're going to use that, we're going to need it on the front end. That was used for our views last time. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do this. And now, ideally, if I run Rails, Heroku, run Rails C, we might be able to see our Yelp API key.
Nikki, when you set that, where does it live then? Like, is that stored on the Heroku server and not in GitHub?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Heroku is just managing it internally on their own databases with a bunch of security and stuff like that.
Okay.
But now we have it, right? So I can go ahead and run Heroku Run Rails DB seed. And yay. Now at this point, is there any non-defended routes here? If I call restaurant.all. All right, yeah, these are all undefended. We're totally cool to get this in the back end. So if I go ahead and I take Heroku, let's type Heroku here and see what this is. Heroku status. Does it tell me right off the bat? Do a lot of things through here. I can go ahead and double check that I actually remember what the URL was. Let's go ahead. I bet I have it open. Cool. /restaurants. And now we have this online. It's on floating wave 30796.herokuapp.com/restaurants, and we are getting a bunch of restaurants on the open internet. You all can check for yourself. I'm going to drop this into the chat and go ahead and see if you can access that on your page. Cool. So now, obviously I have a lot of them. This one's floating wave. Cool. So now I can go over to our actual page, right? There's a bunch of stuff we can do with this. We can go ahead and we can run our settings. I can go ahead and call this lunch iron. Go ahead and check that. Let's go ahead and rename Heroku app. Nice. And it'll go ahead and I'm going to go say Lunch Master. Cool. Now, if we go over here, it is now lunchmaster.com/restaurants. So, oops, did I spell restaurants wrong? Yes. So now, if you want to access this, that old link that I just sent doesn't work anymore. We now have lunchmaster.herokuapp.com/restaurants. Couple things about Heroku. You will by default be paying for the free or hobby version where you don't pay for anything. One cool thing about that is that after about 20 minutes of inactivity, they're going to spin down your server, and then it's going to take about 15 to 20 seconds, depending on how your server gets spun up, when you get a request to that website. Now, this becomes important when you are applying for a job, right? I did have, if you remember way back in our JavaScript phase, if you remember like some of the suggested projects, you saw the Words with Nerds one was one of them. That was my cohort mate, Tally Shear, who's amazing, is currently living in Japan. And basically in her first review or in her first interview, she went into the interview and goes, not even close, Omar, but good try. But basically, she goes like, hey, I've got this cool app and like I can show you. I do vanilla JavaScript all the time. This was for Bounce X, I believe. Wow, I should not be disclosing all of this details. Like, basically they really care about your vanilla JavaScript chops because they're an advertising firm that has to have their ads load on every single web page imaginable, right? Which means that if you're grandma is still running the version of Safari that came with like the original Macs, it should still run, right? So she gets all ready to pull up her app. It's on Heroku. It takes 30 seconds. This person's already pretty annoyed. And then they're like, you're making me sign up to play a game. And then they close the laptop without seeing her very cool app. Obviously, still got the job and deserved it. But if you are going to be using Heroku for your job interviews, just go ahead and ping your server. I have my website, my personal website set up to whenever somebody visits my personal website, it sends a fetch request to every single Heroku instance I know that I'm running that might be linked to on that website so that it wakes up all of those Heroku apps. So just be prepared for that, or you can pay for the real version. The other thing is herokuapp.com. You can always replace that with your own domain. Setting up your own domain is an interesting and cursed little experience. You have to like learn a little bit more about like passing around domain names and stuff. Usually there's a tutorial and you can just debug it. But sometimes you end up trying 3 or 4 things, depending on like going from GoDaddy to Heroku is sometimes not as fun as it sounds, or something like that. But you can do that. Passing around domain names is a thing. Sometimes it takes time is one of the more frustrating things. Like, hey, I did this wrong and took like a day for me to check that I did that wrong. So these are just a couple of things that you'll get into when you get into the fun world of deploying your apps. But you notice this was not too hard, right? We just went ahead and said like had to update a couple of things so that it was working on Heroku, and then just did like git push Heroku main, and we were basically done. And we now have two versions, right? And whenever we're done pushing up our local changes, right, and they work, we can always just go git push Heroku main to update them on the machine. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to take our flunch iron, right? Or I called it something dumb again. Oh, right, it's in the chat, right? I'm going to take this right here. I'm going to take this route. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go into our Rails app. I think we only use localhost 3000 in our action creators. I'm going to go ahead and change some of this. I'm going to go ahead and say const API equals bloop. Cool. And then here, wherever you see fetch, oop, there's a couple of backticks that are going to be mean to me. But for now, let's go ahead and say fetch to API plus this bad boy. API plus this bad boy. This is just me being as lazy as possible writing this. But so if you want to like go ahead and string interpolate, there's nothing to tell you you can't. But now we can go ahead and try this out, and we will see. First off, a couple of errors, because now if I refresh the page, we get some interesting stuff happening. First off, we probably don't have the same token. I refresh the page, it'll be like, here's the login page, and then it'll be like, hey, I didn't get an unexpected end of JSON input. Is that because I did something silly like this doesn't error handle? Let's go ahead and say I would probably have to do like some sort of if logged in user right here. But now we are unfortunately going ahead and running this on my local machine. So I'm going to eventually switch that API key back. But you'll now notice I'm immediately seeing, hey, this token failed, right? I didn't get back the right thing. I didn't, because I have like my local storage.token is wrong, right? But now it's a little bit error handled. So if I go ahead and I sign up, I can be like the big cheese. Let's take the ultimate username if you can grab it. If you're ever like the first adopter to a site, try to grab guest, cause problems. And then we can go ahead and say 1, 2, 3, submit this. And now over here, we are now, if I go to my Rails console right here, if I go ahead and say, hey, who's our last user? It will not say guest, it will say cheesy. If I go over to, but if I were to be able to go over to Heroku Run, Rails console, we will now go ahead and call user.last, and there we have guest, a password filtered, everything fine and dandy. Cool. It's been a while since I broke for questions, and that's on me. I was just too excited to deploy things. How we all doing?
I do have one question. Do you suggest we deploy to Heroku after the review, or we could just do it before going to review?
Up to you. If you feel comfortable with it, like right now, my advice, right? When you go to your review, have the most up-to-date version of your code that works, right? That's the most important thing. So a couple of times I have definitely had students who are like, cool, and check it out, it's deployed on Heroku. And then they're like, oh,
It's breaking, right?
this is an earlier version. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm missing this. Wait, what's going on? Don't be that person. But deploying is something cool. You can be like, hey, this is cool. This is something I can brag about. And it is cool, especially for your final project, to be like, I've already got this deployed. So if you can, do it, but just be aware and be cautious, and ultimately show them an app that works.
Cool, thanks.
So we basically just gone over like create and read, but not really how to update or delete. And I know delete's kind of tricky because it's not really much you can send up. You just get a response that it succeeded or didn't.
Yeah, that's fair. Do we want to do that next? Let's deploy our front end to Heroku. And then I realized I forget how to do. Let's go ahead. React environment variables. I forget how to go ahead and do this in. So they go ahead and be like, basically the reason I'm bringing this up, right, is now I have a very frustrating thing on my front end, right? When I'm working in development, if I go ahead and deploy this, in development, I will want this to be localhost 3000, right? So that I can test this out on my local machine. I can make a mess in my Rails app, and I can make sure that my website doesn't go down while I do that, right? In production, I would want this to be flunchyrendered@herokuapp.com, because ideally everything should be working together in tandem in production. So one very usual thing is to create a not so secret environmental variable in your React side. And I'm going to go ahead and try to do this because I had forgotten that this was something I need to teach you all. Cool. It's like, hey, do not store any private API keys in your React app. Anyone can see these. This is an important thing to know. Why is it that anyone can see your environment variables when you're on your front end?
Everybody can go on the console and just see what the network, like you said, on the console tools shows network and all the params are being sent through.
Yeah, everything that we build in React is produced into an HTML/CSS/JS bundle that we then send over to the client, and we're like, you go ahead and run this on your browser, right? And as we've seen, anything we send over in the browser is readable. Cool. So don't use this to store private API keys. But now we can go ahead and take a look right here. I'm just going to go ahead and read these documentations to see if we can these environmental variables can be useful for displaying information conditionally based on where the project is deployed. Nice. So let's go ahead and see how we can define it. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this bad boy. Oh, .env. Nice. Really, I can just do this? Cool. I'm going to go ahead, create a .env file, paste this bad boy in. I am going to remove this from GitHub. .env. And then it goes ahead and tells me how to do this. Process.env, React app, not secret code. Let's go ahead. Let's make this something a little bit more obvious. The cheese. This is definitely something I've written, not something anyone else has touched. And then let's go ahead. Console.log. Let's see what happens. All right, I need to restart at this point, I need to restart my Rails console or my my React server, because I want to make sure that nice, cool. So now right here, right, I can go ahead and create something that I will call React app. All of these have to start with React app. API equals, and then we can go ahead to //localhost 3000 /. Nope, we don't need a slash. And now, if I go back to our index.js, I'm going to copy this out. I'm instead going to over here in my action creator, I'm going to go ahead and say React app API. Now this code will now on my development machine always use localhost 3000. But when I deploy this to Heroku, I can use a production variable that uses our production URL. I'm going to go try to see that this works. npm start, big money. We get a big mad connection refused. Let's go ahead and take a look at our network tab. Let's clear this out. Retry one more time. See what happens. Interesting. And it's because my Rails server isn't running up. That makes sense. Nice. Cool. When you start working in production, you're going to be really unfamiliar with how it works. And also, you are going to be working with a lot of things that you don't quite understand, right? A lot of things where it feels like you're not very close to the metal when you're working with Heroku and a bunch of things like that. So when things go wrong, your first temptation will be like, it's Heroku's fault. Something's gone missing. I don't get any of this. Please spend the time. And I realize I do this wrong every single time, but spend the time to go ahead and double check that it's not a logic error. Because like 90% of the times that I've spent a day checking configurations on servers, it turns out to be, oh, I forgot to do this way. My logic doesn't work quite as well as I expected it to. My logic definitely won't work as this well in production because I might have 2 requests going on at once. Bunch of different goofy stuff things. Double check that everything works the way you do. And if it's helpful, if you start debugging, try to take notes of what you started doing. Because especially when you get to the point where you're like setting up a Redis server on Heroku, it is very easy to forget what you did, give up, come back to it 2 weeks later, and then have 3 secret Redis servers running that you have no idea what they're talking about. And try this again. Come on, buddy. And here we go. Nice. This is our internal server error from getting the wrong token last time. We should probably start up a guest version, but now if I go Nikki 1, 2, 3, this should work. And here we are. And you will see over here this works. Cool. I'm going to, very important, when you add an environment file, you should go ahead and in your README say, set up this app requires you to set an env variable called API to get this started on your local machine. Please create a .env file in the root directory. Add the backend URL like this. Preview it, make sure it looks good. Nice. Cool. I'm going to go ahead. Cool. And now we can go ahead and push this up too. And now let's go ahead and deploy a React app to Heroku. Now, unfortunately, the best name for a React app, which is, we go over here, Flunchmaster, is taken. So we're going to have to come up with a new URL for actual front end, the thing that most people will be using when they have this app. So please sound off in the comments. So I just Googled deploy React app to Heroku. And nice, it goes ahead and says a couple of crazy things. Let's go ahead and do Heroku React. Now, this is the Heroku blog. Since they're doing Heroku Create, this seems old. I'm a little alarmed by this. Hopefully they have a link here, because I don't respect this. Nope. This looks sketchy. Oh, they're just doing. They're all just telling us how to do this using the not from the command line. Okay, so we set up the React app. Sure. Okay. All right, so we already have all these bad boys, I think. Let's try this out. Heroku create. All right, cool. Cool. Copy this. Paste the second one. Then we do git remote add Heroku loop. Oh no. What about git push Heroku name? Yeah, it's mad at us. This seems like this is my fault. I went ahead and probably used yarn and npm because I don't pay much attention when I'm running these. Let's go ahead and double check package.lock and yarn.lock. If I go ahead and delete this, will things go poorly? I don't think they will. npm start. I've been using npm consistently. We're not mad. We're chill. Let's go ahead and try this again. Let's trash some of these. Cool. Git push Heroku main. Use delete the yarn.lock file. Okay, cool. That makes sense. Np yarn. Where are we at here? Does anyone know where the yarn.lock is usually? I don't see yarn.lock. Oh, there we go. So it looks like that might be on my GitHub. Git remove yarn.lock. Let's try that again. Failed yet again. Git status. Git add. There we go. That's the issue. Once again, I did the same thing I warned you all about beforehand. When you delete things locally, it does not change things in your remote, and Heroku uses your remote. I'm going to go ahead and say delete yarn.lock. What was it even doing? Well, stick to one package manager, please. Cool. Git push. Try one more time. And here we go. This is very exciting. We're now installing node modules on a fake machine that Heroku just imagined up. Remember, when you hear the cloud, you're talking some imagined machine somewhere. And we might as well go ahead and remember how to use our configuration variables. Oops. Heroku config set. Great. Cool. Sleepy Brook 86419 released. Now we can go ahead and we can make sure that we have the right API key. So I'm going to go ahead, Heroku config set, use this bad boy right here. And we know that we have previously called this Flunch Master on our back end. I still haven't seen, oops. Still haven't seen any good recommendations or any recommendations at all for oops, that's not right. Cool. Go ahead and do this. All right. We call this React API equals this bad boy. Cool. Now, if we go over to our Sleepy Brook 86419, should be able to see something cool happen. Flunch and munch. All right. The suspense is killing me here. How are we doing, Heroku? Non-bored way. Flunch Cats 2019. We'll try out all of these. Heroku status. Heroku log. Yes. Heroku logs is a good way to see your error messages. Ooh. So Heroku logs is great. It is your way of seeing all the things you normally see printed out in console. It will spam a lot of weird stuff, but I am noticing that this port 3001, I bet, is going to mess with it. I'm going to go ahead and fix that and see what happens. Let's go over into our manifest.json. Nope, that's the wrong place for it. I'm forgetting where everything is now. Package.json. Nice. All right, let's change that. Cool. Git status. Git.
Is that plus sign always by the branch? I don't think I've noticed that.
Where?
Where the branch shows main at the bottom of the page. Is that
Oh,
plus
interesting.
sign always there? I never noticed
I
that.
don't know.
It's weird. Okay.
Just one more time. Git push. Heroku main. If anyone finds out what the plus. Oh, now the plus went away. So it's not always there. Is the only way I've changed something? Maybe. Nice. Now, this is a cool error message, not because it's very helpful. It just tells you to use Heroku logs. but it's a cool error message because it's something that you will occasionally find browsing the regular internet. Since this is an error message you will see in production, I have applied to a company after being like, hey, I was using your site and I got an application error in Heroku. I'd be glad to help. Did not get a response for that. Negging as an application strategy is pretty terrible too. But let's go ahead and let's try this one more time. You're gonna be chill now? Cool. So that's change from, hey, there we go. All right, let's start up a cool. Test. No, we're not doing test for this. First post. Yes. And now here we are. No, thank you. Now here we are back in our app with everything working. And I'm going to need at this point for us to let's go ahead and try something out. Create a poll. What should we call our app? And we have a couple. Lunch. Oh, come on, buddy. I might have some issues with those parentheses. We'll see. Broadway was good one. Omar. I think we're just doing like that. Lunch in munch. Non add way for sure. And it was magic.
Went literal there.
And we'll make this multiple choice. Let's see what people do. This is going to go very poorly. Save. Let's go ahead and launch this poll. All right, let's get this in. All right, wait 30 seconds while I remember how to rename Heroku app CLI. Ooh, we got a tie. Cool. So I don't see why we can't combine these two. Lunch in munch, lunch cats 2019. It's like, no, you are not putting a parentheses in here. So we're just gonna make this a dash. Cool. Uppercase letters. Oh, cool. No uppercase letters. So I'm going to go ahead, for the sake of making this more obvious, a lot more hyphens than I think we started with. But we are now. We're going to have to start getting rid of some stuff. Lunch and Munch Cats 2019. And here we go. Now, if we go to the website, Lunch and Munch Cats 2019, end this poll, you can all pull this app in your browsers and we can start creating apps. Cool. with exactly time at this point. Cool. We're at 7 minutes. This is the one lecture that I certainly didn't prep at all, and the only one where we're ending exactly on time. So I think it's about time for me to but it's also one of our final lectures. So if I finally figured it out, that's great. I don't have any plans for next lecture. If you want to see something, it's going to be on Tuesday. That will probably be our last fish lecture. I might like do some cool office hours, do some things that I will just call pods, but I'll record them. But then we're eventually going to have the graduation lecture, because that's important. Sorry, your graduation speech. And then but that's basically it. Cool. All right. Good luck, everybody, and hit me up if you need anything.
Thank you.
Later.
Thank you so much.
Yep. No worries, everyone. Great to have you all here.
Thank you.